Hey everyone, Andrew here, and I'm going to be doing another movie review. This is something I wanted to do for a little while, because I was trying to think of stuff to do for Fighting the Hate. I had a bunch of movies that I considered doing this format for, but came to the realization that it's not that they're hated films, it's that nobody talks about them. And me being a cinephile, I've seen a lot of films, and there's some of these films that I find to be really interesting or amazing or just outstanding in some way, and they're just not talked about ever. And I decided to shine a little light on them, give them a little bit of love, because some of these films, just because you haven't heard of them, doesn't mean they're not amazing or really interesting or really well done. So this will be a new little segment that I'll do once in a while. I'll be calling Spreading the Joy. And yeah, take films that don't have a lot of eyes on them, don't have a lot of reviews on them, or maybe they do, I don't know, but just be talking about them and explaining to them. It's going to be a lot of the similar format to Fighting the Hate. I'm going to talk a little bit about the plot, what the critical's reception, what I could find of it was, and, my personal thoughts and why I think this film deserves a little bit more love and recognition. So for the first film we're going to be talking about is a film called Heart and Souls.
A romantic comedy with heart.
You see, something good comes out of everything.
Heart and Souls.
It is a 1993 film directed by Ron Underwood, and it stars Robert Downey Jr. as the lead, and, before he got blacklisted from Hollywood for so many years due to his drug habits, and an extremely stellar cast of supporting actors. It is a fantasy, comedy, drama with a little bit of romance in there. I actually considered doing this back in February instead of Night and Day, but the romance is such a small part of the story that I did not feel right about doing that during, Valentine's Day month. So I opted to do Night and Day instead. But this one legitimately is one of my favorite films. It is my favorite ghost film ever done. And I truly believe more people need to give this film a look-see. So, I'll start out with the plot. So the plot is it's set in San Francisco in the 1950s. These four strangers get on a trolley bus in the middle of the night. Four passengers. You have Penny, who is a single mother who is working nights as a telephone operator, and has to leave her kids at home by themselves, being watched by the neighbor. She's regretting that, but she's doing what she has to keep everyone fed and all that. You have Harrison, who is a would-be singer with a stellar voice, but suffers from an extremely high level of stage fright and can't perform. You have Julia, who is a waitress who just moved out of the country into the city and left her boyfriend in the country, and he shows up to propose to her, and she tells him to leave, and immediately regrets it and is chasing after him to let him know how she feels about him. And you'd have Milo, who is a small-time thief who recently stole a book of very valuable stamps from this young kid for his boss, and the kid got them from his grandfather, and they're his most prized possession, and he's been regretting it and has been trying to steal it back and nearly got killed by his bosses. So it's basically, trying to figure out how to make up for his worst thing he's ever done in his mind. The bus driver is a man named Hal, and he is getting increasingly distracted while driving by the attractive woman in the car next to him who's doing seductive things. On another street, there is a husband and wife who are rushing to the hospital because the wife is pregnant and is about to give birth, and the car and the trolley bus nearly collide, but the car manages to be fine, but the trolley bus ends up going over a bridge and crashing.
One night, four people were driven by destiny, overtaken by fate.
the 4 passengers climb out of the top, and they're like, it's amazing that we all survived this. And then they see the bus driver get pulled upwards through the bus and pulled upwards into the sky, and they're like, I don't think we did. And then they feel themselves floating, and then they get yanked backwards and find themselves at the car with the husband and wife, and the wife has just given birth to this young boy, Thomas. And they figure out over time that it's like they are tied to the young boy, Thomas. He's the only person who can see them, and they cannot leave his general area. Like, if they get more than a few meters away from him, there's an invisible wall or a force that yanks them back. And they are just kind of stuck following this young boy. And at about 8 or 9, he starts going to school, and he has these 4 imaginary friends, as everyone thinks he does, and he starts to get into some trouble, mostly due to the ghost convincing him to do things he shouldn't. Like, you know, so he's talking to no one and getting odd stares, but then he's also he would skip school and go to the horse track and bet on the races. And like, that was all Milo's influence on him, thinking that he's going crazy. His own parents are on like the verge of divorce and sending him to a mental institute because he keeps doing these things. And the 4 ghosts are realizing that them being a part of his life is only hurting Thomas, so they're like, we have to make it so he can't see us anymore. Since we can't leave, we have to turn it off. So they all give him a heartfelt goodbye and disappear. And this ends up wrecking Thomas, and he ends up going to psychotherapy to make him realize that these 4 people were imaginary friends and that they were never real to begin with. And then he grows up into Robert Downey Jr. and Robert Downey Jr. is now an adult. He's working a job he doesn't particularly love, but he's very good at it. But he ends up having this girlfriend that he really likes and he's getting really close to, but she's ready to move on to like the next step of like meeting the parents and this, that, and the other. But he's afraid of commitment, afraid of really trusting anyone because he's afraid that they will leave him too. And the 4 ghosts are still trapped with him, still following him, and they are just having to come to terms with the fact that they may be doing this forever. And then all of a sudden, a bright green trolley bus comes sliding through a wall and shows up in front of them, and the door opens, and it's the bus driver that killed them. And he's like, it is time. And they're like, what? And he's like, oh yeah, no, so I know I'm a little late, apologies, I'm here to take you back. You know, it's time for you to move on and become, you know, part of heaven and part of the guardian angels and protect newborn souls. And they're like, wait a minute, you're the guy that got us killed. We've been stuck with this kid for 30 years because you had to be distracted and got us all killed. And he's like, I am sorry, it wasn't intentional. It's like, I'm suffering too. I'm stuck driving this bus for 1,000 years as my punishment for getting you guys killed. At least you guys got a chance to, you all at least got a chance to have your unfinished business complete and, make sure everything is okay with your family. And they're like, what are you talking about? And he's like, wait, the angel never came and told... Oh, those guys are so far behind schedule. Yeah, no, you were to, you had a chance to deal with your unfinished business. You could have Thomas help you with that. You're human. It's like, and if he doesn't want to help you, you could always take over his body. But
you're supposed to use him as a vehicle. And if he won't do it, you enter his body and you make him do it.
If he helps you, you can gain a chance to fix the thing that went wrong and make, solve your thing that kept you from moving on in the first place. And they're like, we didn't know that. It's like, well, we need more time. You gotta give us time to do that. And the bus driver doesn't want to, but eventually caves in and is like, okay, I'll give you as much time as I can, but we are on a schedule. I will wait until the last moment, but when I come back, I have to take one of you. And it's like, you have hours, maybe days. But your time is coming up, and when it's up, that's all you're gonna get. And so he gets back on the bus and drives away, and the four ghosts rush over to Thomas and are trying to get Thomas to see them, trying to get him to help them, but it's been a while, so they have to figure out how to refocus and reconnect to him, and they end up figuring out through singing a song they used to sing to him as a child, which is Walk Like a Man by the Four Seasons. And Thomas sees them and freaks out, and of course he's driving the car when this happens and crashes.
He's not that happy to see us.
He ends up in the hospital. But when he wakes up in the hospital, he still sees them, and he's like, oh no, the hallucinations are back. And so he runs and is getting in the elevator and goes up to the psychiatric ward and is going to thinking, he thinks he has a psychological break, but as he's heading towards the front desk, this woman is like, oh hey, I like the bowler hat, to one of the ghosts, and walks by, and Thomas is like, wait, what? And he goes and talks to the woman. It's like, you can see them? And she's like, yeah. It's like, can you describe them? And she describes them all perfectly. And you end up seeing that she's schizophrenic and has her own psychological problem. But it convinces Thomas that these beings are real. And then they tell him what they need their help with. And
we're supposed to have you help finish things for us.
It's all part of the grand scheme of things.
He's like, and nope. And tries to go back to work and tries to ignore them. But they start taking over his body and forcing him to do things that he doesn't want to do.
I want your body. No, that's not funny. These four souls
with no idea how long I've waited for the chance to, to stop
are about to get.
And I will say right now that is a stellar idea for this, because it gives Robert Downey Jr. this lovely range of a performance where you see him possessed by each of the ghosts, and you can tell when he's possessed by each of the ghosts and who they are. Like, it plays off very well in the film. And so finally he caves in and agrees to go help them out. And that is where I'm going to end the description of the plot, because the rest is just him figuring out what's their unfinished business and helping them come to terms with that. And overall, I think this is a film that got a very kind of mediocre response to it. Like, it has a 56% on Rotten Tomato from critics, and it has about the same on Metacritic. And review-wise, I saw a couple different things. Like, there was some that gave it a decent amount of praise. Like, Rolling Stone was like, Heart and Souls breaks the gimmicky jinx by blending laughs and tears into a magical fantasy, and Downey Jr. shows an explosive talent for physical comedy. But then you also have reviews that are very negative or just, like, hacky. Like, the Entertainment Weekly put in, you may hate yourself for liking Heart and Souls, but at least you can take comfort in the fact that you have been had by professionals. And that comment feels like a slap in the face to me, as someone who has loved this film since I was a child. Like, if you like this film, you're a schmuck that fell for, by professional con artists. And I'm like, no, the film was just actually very good. It is also sad to say that the accolades that this film got is pretty sad, in that it only received a whole bunch of Saturn nominations, and for directing and acting and writing, but the only one that won was Robert Downey Jr. for Best Actor. And yeah, the fact that this is a film that relatively has gotten somewhat forgotten is just sad and amazing to me, because it's just such a good idea and concept and film. Like, there's so many little things in this that just are so interesting. I really love the world building in this. I love the rules that you have for the ghosts and what their dynamic is. It's like, they are there, they can't interact, but they can be seen by the person that they're connected to. They can take over the person they're connected to, but they also have that limited range where it's like, if they try to go too far, that I also really like it's like the concept of what they did with heaven and all that stuff is kind of interesting, because they make it very clear that there's a plan and there's things going on and things are supposed to turn out the way they're supposed to turn out. But then you also get, like, the two representatives that are supposed to be for heaven are late, bumbling idiots. Like, we never even meet the angel. The angel just never shows up, and then the bus driver flat out admits, like, oh yeah, I'm like 10 years too late there than I should be, but, you know, I'm here. And then, you know, he becomes like this stalking ghost, like, fear for the entire rest of the thing, because anytime you see that bus for the rest of the film, you're like, oh no, ticking clock, we gotta run, we gotta hurry, or they're gonna take you. And
Universal Pictures presents...
the cast in this film is freaking stellar. Robert Downey Jr. is amazing in this film.
Robert Downey Jr. gives an Oscar-caliber performance.
Look, this is all very illuminating, all this business mumbo-jumbo, but basically, who gives a when there's a beautiful dish like you in front of you?
He has such a good range and such a good performance in this. Like, he has some of the best dialogue. Like, even Downey Jr. himself has admitted this is one of his favorite performances of his entire career, and I can see why. He is just stellar in this. But you also have...
including Charles Grodin.
I'll fail. I'm telling you, I always fail.
Kyra Sedgwick.
You're so afraid of being hurt. You're gonna end up all alone.
Elizabeth Shue.
Anytime things get remotely serious, you start, I don't know, wiggling around.
Tom Sizemore.
I'm a professional, all right?
And Academy Award nominees David Paymer.
Let's go, dead people.
And Alfre Woodard.
I am so proud of you.
You have a young Eric Lloyd as the young Thomas, which Eric Lloyd is most famous for being, you know, the kid from the Santa Claus films, and he's still pretty good in this. Like, he's one of the decent child performers that I've seen. But yeah, the cast, and you even have B.B. King as himself, and he gives a stellar guitar performance. Like, it's really interesting. It's got so many little things and so many interesting little concepts and ideas. The cast is stellar, the writing is stellar, the dialogue in this film is brilliant. Like, it's just such good witty dialogue and good comebacks and good zingers in this. Like, there's a line in this that I will always remember, and it's one of my favorite lines of all time, and it's just like literally the ghosts talking about Thomas's ex-girlfriends, and one of them's like, she's much better than Little Miss, look at my butt, come on baby Thomas, look at my butt. And I'm like, I have that on loop in my brain every day. Like, it's just such a dorky line, but it's performed so well. And there's just so many good little zings and dialogues. Like, there's one of them, like, in Solid Milo, and he's like, you're killing me, you're killing me. Oh, right, I'm already dead. It's just, like, it's such good dialogue. And there's such good banter between all four of them. You can feel the connection that these four people have. It's like, these people wouldn't necessarily be friends, but because they've been together so long, they just bounce off each other so well. And it's so full of warmth and so heartfelt. Like, you really feel the message and the passion and the energy of this film. Like, this is a film you could argue that each of the ghosts represents something for Thomas to overcome and grow, and it might actually just be him having a full-on psychotic break, but it's to help him, you know, get over the things that were holding him back. Like, you could make that argument that this is really just a person going crazy, and that could be an interesting take on that film. But, like, legitimately, it's just a heartwarming...
Heart and Souls is one of the summer's most enjoyable, heartfelt movies.
What is going on?
And Rolling Stone raves, it's buoyantly funny, a magical fantasy.
Don't you give me attitude, I'm a mother.
Interesting, creative, unique film, and is legitimately my favorite ghost film out there. Like, I put this up there with Ghostbusters, I put this up with the other ghost films. It's one of my favorite ghost film. It's my favorite ghost film, and it's one of my favorite films overall. It's really interesting. The directing in it is stellar. It's done by Ron Underwood, who is famous for doing City Slickers and Tremors and Holiday in Handcuffs, and also, sadly, you know, Adventures of Pluto Nash. But like, that one had so much trouble behind it. I don't think even the best director in the world could save that film. And I'll give him a pass on that one because he's made such great other films. The story is very interesting. Like you could have just kept the story at the beginning, where it's like, honestly, I would have followed the story if they'd not died and just been humans, because these were interesting enough characters from the get-go that you care a little bit about what's going on in their lives. But even if it just been them haunting, you know, Thomas for the rest of his life, that would have been an interesting story too. Like, the idea of just being stuck to this one soul and this one person and following him for centuries. Like, not centuries, decades. Following him for decades is really compelling and really interesting. And I extremely like the way it was done in this film. The one complaint I saw with the reviews is that it has a real little bit of a cheesiness to it, that it's very much wears its heart on its sleeve. And I'm like, yeah, I could see that as coming off cheesy, but to me it was always like, this was always just a really heartfelt, intentional story. Like, you understand what is going on with each of these characters. If I was going to give any complaint to this story whatsoever, it is going to be about the romance of it, and that Robert Downey Jr. has that girl that he's dating, and like, even in the trailers for this, they call it a romantic comedy, and I'm like, she's in like 5 minutes of the film at most. And yeah, I feel like if it's going to be considered a romantic film, the love interest should be in the film for more than 5 minutes. But like, that is like an entirely tiny little nitpick, because like, that's not the focus of the story. The focus of the story is not the romance necessarily. The focus of the story is the characters and the heart and the emotion and learning to be better people. Like, this to me is just this really heartfelt, emotional, interesting, beautiful, well done film that literally no one talks about ever. And I think for most people this is probably a 3.5 to a 4 film. Like, it's good, it's not amazing. To me, like, I connect so much with the heart and the emotion and the feeling about it that it's easily a 5 out of 5 for me. I could easily see giving it like a 6, maybe. A film that makes me smile from ear to ear every time I watch it, and it's something I truly do highly recommend. It's not streaming anywhere right now as far as I can tell, but it is on Blu-ray, it is on DVD, it is on VHS, which I have a copy of it on VHS, and I've worn the tape out quite a bit because I've watched this so many times. But it's still, like, legitimately one of my favorite films of all time. But what do you all think? Do you like the film? Do you hate the film? Have you even heard of the film? Does this sound like something that would be interesting to you? Let me know in the comments below. If you have any films that you would like to suggest that I do something like this on, let me know. Happy watching, happy reading. I will see you all next time. Bye.